The rain was a relentless curtain, blurring the edges of the world as I hurried home from my late shift at the diner. October in Oak Haven always felt like a prelude to something sinister, a perpetual twilight hanging heavy with dampness and the scent of decaying leaves. Usually I loved it. Tonight, the oppressive atmosphere was just another layer of exhaustion clinging to me. I took the shortcut through the Blackwood Cemetery, a sprawling expanse of ancient stones and gnarled oaks that bisected my neighborhood. It was faster, even if the thought of walking amongst the dead at this hour usually gave me the creeps. Tonight, speed was paramount. All I wanted was a hot shower and the oblivion of sleep. The cemetery was deserted, the only sound the drumming rain and the whisper of wind through the skeletal trees. My footsteps crunched on the gravel paths, the rhythmic noise a strangely comforting counterpoint to the surrounding silence. Then I heard it. A different sound, low and guttural, emanating from deeper within the cemetery, beyond the familiar rows of weathered headstones. It wasn't human, not exactly. More like animalistic, yet tinged with an unnatural resonance that sent a shiver crawling up my spine. Curiosity, that insidious human trait, pricked at me. Against my better judgment, I veered off the path, drawn towards the unsettling sound. Pushing through overgrown ivy and damp branches, I ventured into the older section of the cemetery, where tombstones leaned at precarious angles, swallowed by moss and time. The air here was colder, heavier, thick with the smell of wet earth and something else. Something acrid, almost metallic. The sound intensified, leading me to a clearing, or what was once a clearing. Years of neglect had allowed trees and undergrowth to reclaim the space, leaving a small hidden alcove surrounded by a claustrophobic wall of foliage. And in the center of this alcove, bathed in the ghostly glow of the moon struggling through the clouds, was something I couldn't immediately comprehend. It was a circle carved into the muddy earth, stark and precise against the chaotic overgrowth. Around the perimeter of the circle, flickering candlelight danced, casting grotesque shadows that writhed and pulsed against the surrounding trees. And within the circle, figures moved. Human figures, cloaked and hooded, their faces obscured by deep shadows. They were chanting a low, rhythmic drone in a language I didn't recognize, yet somehow felt in the marrow of my bones. Their movements were ritualistic, slow and deliberate, punctuated by the strange guttural sound I'd first heard, which now seemed to be coming from one of the hooded figures. In the very center of the circle, on a makeshift altar fashioned from moss-covered stones, lay something. It was obscured by the flickering shadows, but I could make out a shape, vaguely human, unnaturally still. The sickly sweet, metallic smell was strongest here, emanating from the altar, clinging to the air like a shroud. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the unnatural silence of the cemetery. Fear, cold and paralyzing, gripped me. This wasn't a harmless late-night gathering. This was something else, something profoundly wrong. Frozen, I watched, hidden behind a thick curtain of ivy, my breath catching in my throat. The chanting intensified, rising in pitch and volume until it became a cacophony of guttural sounds and rhythmic syllables. The figure at the altar moved, their cloaked arm rising, glinting in the candlelight. And in their hand I saw it, a knife. Silver, wickedly sharp, catching the moonlight like a promise of pain. That's when I understood. This wasn't just a ritual. This was a sacrifice. Panic seized me, a tidal wave threatening to drown my senses. I had to get out of here. Now, before they noticed me. Before whatever they were doing was finished. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to back away, my footsteps silent on the damp earth. My gaze remained fixed on the clearing, terrified of what I might see if I looked away. I retreated inch by agonizing inch, praying they wouldn't hear me, wouldn't sense my presence. I reached the main path, my legs trembling, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I didn't run, not yet. Running would be too loud, too conspicuous. I forced myself to walk, quickly but deliberately, away from the clearing, away from the chanting, away from the altar. As I reached the cemetery gates and stumbled onto the familiar streetlights of my neighborhood, I finally broke into a run. I ran like hell, my breath ragged, my lungs burning, the image of the silver knife flashing in my mind. I didn't stop running until I slammed the door to my apartment behind me, bolting the locks, every muscle in my body screaming. I leaned against the door, gasping for air, my heart still pounding like a trapped bird. I had seen something I shouldn't have. Something terrifying. Something that had chilled me to the bone. And I had a sickening feeling deep in my gut that it wasn't over. That just witnessing it wasn't enough. That somehow I had now become a part of it. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old building, every rustle of leaves outside my window, sounded like footsteps approaching, like chanting voices drawing closer. I kept seeing the hooded figures, the silver knife, the circle carved into the earth. The metallic smell seemed to linger in my apartment, clinging to my clothes, to my skin. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean and deceptively peaceful. Sunlight streamed through my window, painting stripes of gold across the dusty floorboards. For a fleeting moment, I almost convinced myself it had been a nightmare, a product of exhaustion and too much caffeine. But the memory was too vivid, the fear too real. And the metallic scent, faint but undeniable, still hung in the air. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of performance art? Some elaborate prank? But the chilling intensity of the ritual, the cold dread that had gripped me, made that explanation ludicrous. This was something darker, something older. I decided to go to the police. Surely they could investigate. Anonymous tip, late-night disturbance in the cemetery. Keep it vague, keep myself out of it. At the station, the air felt sterile, impersonal. I spoke to a bored-looking officer behind a desk, a young man with tired eyes and a uniform that seemed too big for him. I told him about the sounds, the figures in the cemetery, the unsettling atmosphere. I carefully omitted the knife, the chanting, the feeling of ritual sacrifice. Just a strange gathering, I called it. He listened with polite disinterest, tapping his fingers on the keyboard, filling out a form. Okay ma'am, we'll send a patrol car by later tonight, see if there's anything going on. Probably just some kids messing around. He handed me a card with a case number. We'll let you know if we find anything. His dismissive tone deflated me. He didn't believe me. He thought I was a crazy lady spooked by teenagers. I knew with a chilling certainty that whatever I had witnessed was far from kids messing around. As I walked out of the station, a prickling sensation crawled across my skin. I felt watched. I glanced around, but the street was busy, filled with the ordinary bustle of a weekday morning. People hurried past, engrossed in their own lives, oblivious to the cold dread gnawing at me. But the feeling persisted, a sense of unseen eyes following my every move. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just paranoia, the lingering effects of the previous night's terror. But the feeling intensified throughout the day. At work, in the diner, I kept glancing over my shoulder, scanning the faces of customers, searching for something. I didn't even know what. It started subtly. A shadow in my peripheral vision that vanished when I turned to look. A whisper of sound just on the edge of hearing that faded into the background noise. A fleeting glimpse of movement in a reflection that wasn't there when I looked directly. Then it escalated. That evening, as I was locking up the diner, I noticed something odd on the door. Scratched into the metal, barely visible in the dim streetlight, was a symbol. A circle with a vertical line bisecting it, and a single dot in the upper half. It was crude, almost childish, but it sent a jolt of ice water through my veins. It was the symbol I had seen carved into the earth in the cemetery, marking the ritual circle. My breath hitched in my throat. This wasn't paranoia. This was deliberate. They knew. They knew I had been there. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the lock open. I scrambled inside, slamming the door shut, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped animal. I scanned the diner, every shadow seeming to writhe and deepen. The familiar smell of coffee and grease now felt tainted, replaced by the metallic scent that clung to me, to everything. I was no longer alone. I knew it, felt it in the air, in the silence that suddenly felt charged, expectant. As I turned off the lights and headed for the back exit, I heard it. A whisper, close, breathy, seemingly coming from right behind me, even though I knew I was alone in the diner. Eyes watch. The words were barely audible, a sibilant hiss that sent a shockwave of terror through me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat, but there was nothing there. Just shadows and the looming shapes of empty tables and chairs. I fled out the back door, running into the alley, the darkness swallowing me whole. The whisper echoed in my ears, chasing me, a phantom presence clinging to my shadow. From that moment on, my life became a waking nightmare. The strange occurrences escalated rapidly. Objects in my apartment would shift positions overnight. A book would be on the table in the morning when I was sure I'd left it on the shelf. A chair would be facing the wrong way. Small things at first easily dismissed as forgetfulness or clumsiness. But they were too consistent, too deliberate. Then came the messages. Cryptic notes appearing in the most unsettling places. Tucked into my purse, slipped under my door, pinned to my bathroom mirror. They were always the same, variations on a theme. We know what you saw. Silence is golden. The truth is best left buried. Eyes are always watching. Each note sent a fresh wave of terror crashing over me. They were playing with me, toying with my fear, letting me know they were always there, always aware. My paranoia grew, consuming me. I started seeing them everywhere. Hooded figures in crowds, their faces obscured by shadows. Dark cars lingering on my street. Faces in windows across the street, disappearing as soon as I looked directly at them. I jumped at shadows, flinched at sudden noises, my nerves stretched taut, ready to snap. Sleep became a luxury, stolen in fitful snatches, plagued by nightmares of chanting figures and silver knives. I tried to talk to someone, anyone. My best friend, Maria, listened patiently, her brow furrowed with concern as I recounted the events. But I could see the doubt in her eyes. She thought I was stressed, overworked, maybe having a breakdown. "Sarah, maybe you should see a doctor," she suggested gently. "You've been under so much pressure lately." I couldn't tell her the full truth. The words caught in my throat, sounding insane even to my own ears. Ritual sacrifice? Secret cult? It was the stuff of bad movies, not real life. And I was terrified of what she would think, of confirming her unspoken suspicion that I was losing my mind. So, I retreated further into myself, isolating myself from everyone, trapped in my own private hell of fear and paranoia. The distorted reality began slowly, subtly, almost imperceptibly. Things would flicker. Lights would dim and brighten for no reason. Sounds would warp, stretching and distorting like a broken record. Once, I swore the walls of my apartment seemed to breathe, pulsing gently in and out. These episodes were brief, fleeting, easily dismissed as tricks of the light, auditory hallucinations, stress-induced delusions. But they were becoming more frequent, more intense, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. Then came the dream. I was back in the cemetery, the rain falling, the air heavy and cold. But this time it wasn't night. It was perpetual twilight, the sky a bruised, unsettling purple. The tombstones seemed taller, more menacing, their shadows stretching long and distorted across the muddy ground. I was drawn back to the clearing, to the ritual circle. But this time the figures were there, waiting. They were no longer hooded. Their faces were pale, elongated, with eyes that were black pits, devoid of pupils, reflecting the unnatural twilight. They turned towards me, their movements slow, deliberate, their mouths opening in silent chants. And from their mouths, instead of sound, came whispers. My name repeated over and over, sibilant and cold, laced with malice. "Sarah, Sarah, Sarah." They began to move towards me, gliding across the ground, their footsteps making no sound. I tried to run, but my legs were leaden, refusing to obey. They closed in, their pale hands reaching for me, their black eyes burning into my soul. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The dream lingered, more real than reality, the whispers echoing in my ears. That morning when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. My eyes were bloodshot, shadowed, reflecting a terror that had burrowed deep into my soul. My face was gaunt, pale, etched with lines of exhaustion and fear. I looked like a ghost of my former self. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I was losing my grip on reality, teetering on the brink of madness. I had to do something. I had to understand what I had witnessed, who these people were, and why they were tormenting me. The police were useless. Maria was worried but skeptical. I was alone. But maybe there was another way. Maybe I could fight back. Maybe I could find out the truth. I remembered the library, the old Oakhaven library, tucked away in a forgotten corner of town. It was rumored to hold local history, town archives, forgotten lore. Maybe, just maybe, there was something there, something that could shed light on what I had witnessed, on the strange symbols, on the chilling whispers. Desperation drove me. I had nothing left to lose. The library was a relic, a grand old building with creaking wooden floors, towering shelves lined with dusty books, and the pervasive smell of old paper and forgotten stories. It was almost deserted, just a few elderly patrons browsing quietly, and a librarian with tired eyes behind a towering desk. I started in the local history section, sifting through town chronicles, old newspaper clippings, faded photographs. I searched for anything about the Blackwood Cemetery, about strange rituals, about secret societies in Oakhaven. Hours passed, blurring into a monotonous haze of dusty pages and fruitless searches. Just when I was about to give up, my eyes snagged on a faded newspaper clipping, tucked away in a forgotten file labeled Unsolved Mysteries. The headline was chilling: "Disappearance in Blackwood Cemetery, Local Man Vanishes Without a Trace." The article was dated 20 years ago, detailing the mysterious vanishing of a young man who was last seen walking through the Blackwood Cemetery late at night. No body was ever found, no explanation ever given. Below the article, almost overlooked, was a smaller, hand-drawn symbol. A circle with a vertical line bisecting it, and a single dot in the upper half. The same symbol I had seen scratched on the diner door, the same symbol carved into the earth in the cemetery. My heart leaped. This wasn't just coincidence. This was a connection. I dug deeper, searching for more articles, more clues. And slowly, painstakingly, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Other disappearances stretching back decades, all linked to the Blackwood Cemetery, all shrouded in mystery, all accompanied by whispers of strange rituals and local legends. Then I found it. A book, bound in cracked leather, its pages yellowed and brittle with age, tucked away in a locked cabinet labeled Restricted Access. I sweet-talked the librarian, feigning academic interest, and she grudgingly retrieved it for me, shooting me a suspicious glance. The title was embossed in faded gold lettering, Occult Oakhaven, a compendium of local folklore and shadow histories. It was a dusty, forgotten tome, filled with arcane symbols, cryptic diagrams, and chilling tales. Flipping through the brittle pages, my fingers trembling, I found it again. The symbol. And beneath it, a name, the Order of the Obsidian Eye. The text was dense, archaic, filled with obscure references and chilling descriptions. But as I deciphered the faded words, the terrifying truth began to unfold. The Order of the Obsidian Eye. A secretive society, rooted in ancient pagan rituals, rumored to have been active in Oakhaven for centuries. They were said to practice dark arts, to commune with entities beyond human comprehension, to offer sacrifices in exchange for power. The book described their rituals, their symbols, their beliefs. It spoke of sacrifices made under the light of the blood moon, of gateways open to other dimensions, of entities hungry for something. As I read, the pieces clicked into place, forming a horrifying mosaic of truth. The chanting, the ritual circle, the silver knife, the sacrifice, the metallic smell, the whispers, the symbols, the disappearances. It all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. I had witnessed a ritual of the Order of the Obsidian Eye. And now they knew I had seen too much. They were hunting me, stalking me, tormenting me, determined to silence me before I could reveal their secrets. The book mentioned a guardian, a high-ranking member of the Order, tasked with protecting their secrets, silencing any who threatened to expose them. The guardian was said to be ruthless, cunning, always one step ahead. My blood ran cold. The antagonist wasn't just a vague, shadowy organization. It was something more targeted, more personal. It was the guardian. And they were coming for me. I slammed the book shut, my hands shaking, the library suddenly feeling cold and oppressive. I had the truth, but the truth had also put me in even more danger. I was no longer just paranoid. I was hunted. By a secret society, by a guardian, by something ancient and terrifying. And they were always watching. I had to make a choice. Run. Fight back. Embrace the terrifying truth? Running felt like the most logical option. Leave Oakhaven, disappear, start a new life, far away from the Order and their secrets. But where could I go? They were everywhere, watching, listening. Could I ever truly escape them? Fighting back seemed impossible. What could I, a simple diner waitress, do against a centuries-old secret society, against a ruthless guardian? It was David against Goliath, except Goliath was invisible, insidious, always one step ahead. Embracing the terrifying truth, that was the most unsettling option of all. What did it even mean? To accept the existence of the Order, their rituals, their dark powers? To delve deeper into their world, to try to understand them? It felt like madness, like willingly stepping into the darkness. But as I looked at the book in my hands, at the chilling symbols, at the faded words that had unveiled such a horrifying reality, I felt a strange pull, a morbid curiosity tugging at me. Maybe understanding them was the only way to survive. Maybe embracing the truth was the only way to fight back. A shocking, mind-twisting climax was promised. An impossible choice. And I knew with chilling certainty that my time was running out. The guardian was closing in. The whispers were growing louder. And the eyes were always watching. The air in my apartment felt heavy, charged, as if something unseen was pressing down on me. The distorted reality was intensifying. The flickering lights were now erratic, plunging the room into near darkness and then blinding light. The sounds were warping, stretching, echoes bouncing off invisible walls. I knew they were close. The guardian, the Order, whatever they were tightening the noose. I decided to fight back. Not with weapons, not with physical force, but with knowledge. With the truth I had unearthed in the library. Maybe, just maybe, understanding their rituals, their weaknesses could give me an edge, could offer a sliver of hope. I spent the rest of the day poring over the book, deciphering the archaic text, studying the diagrams, trying to glean any advantage I could. I focused on the rituals, the sacrifices, the entities they communed with. I searched for weaknesses, for vulnerabilities, for anything that could be used against them. The book mentioned a counter-ritual, a way to disrupt the Order's power, to sever their connection to the entities they worshipped. It was dangerous, complex, requiring arcane knowledge and ritualistic items. But it was there, a faint glimmer of possibility in the overwhelming darkness. As night fell, the distorted reality intensified. The walls seemed to breathe more rapidly, the shadows writhed and deepened, the whispers grew louder, closer, almost tangible. I could feel their presence, a cold, malevolent energy permeating the apartment. Suddenly, the lights went out completely, plunging the room into absolute darkness. A bone-chilling dread washed over me, paralyzing me with fear. This wasn't a power outage. This was deliberate. They were here. Then, a single candle flickered to life in the center of my living room, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls. And in the candlelight they appeared. The hooded figures, their faces obscured by shadows, their pale hands reaching out. They emerged from the shadows, coalescing from the darkness, their presence filling the room, suffocating me. The guardian stepped forward, the figure in the center, taller, more imposing than the others. They raised a hand, and the whispering intensified, swirling around me, pressing in on my mind, threatening to shatter my sanity. "You have seen too much," the guardian's voice rasped, low and guttural, resonating with unnatural power. "Silence is the only path." They moved closer, their hands outstretched, ready to silence me, to take me into the darkness. But I was ready. I had made my choice. I would not run. I would not surrender. I would fight back. With trembling hands, I reached into my bag and pulled out the book. I opened it to the page detailing the counter-ritual, the arcane symbols glowing faintly in the candlelight. Taking a deep breath, I began to chant. Not their guttural chants of sacrifice, but the ancient words of the counter-ritual, the words of defiance, the words of power. My voice was shaky at first, but it grew stronger, resonating with a force I didn't know I possessed. The symbols on the page seemed to pulse with light, energy crackling around me. The hooded figures recoiled, hissing, their movements faltering. The guardian's voice became enraged. "Foolish mortal. You cannot comprehend the power you tamper with." But I continued to chant, louder, more forcefully, the ancient words echoing in the apartment, pushing back against the darkness. The air crackled with energy, the candle flame flickered violently, the shadows recoiled. The distorted reality intensified to a breaking point. The walls seemed to twist and warp, the floor buckled, the very fabric of reality around me seemed to unravel. The whispers became screams, a cacophony of tormented voices trying to drown out my chant. But I held on, my voice unwavering, fueled by desperation, by fear, by a desperate hope for survival. I chanted the final words of the counter-ritual, the ancient syllables resonating with a blinding flash of light. The candle flame extinguished, plunging the room into absolute darkness once more. But this time the darkness felt different. Lighter, cleaner, devoid of the oppressive presence that had haunted me for days. Silence descended, heavy, profound, broken only by my ragged breathing. I stood there in the darkness, trembling, exhausted, my voice hoarse, my body drained. Slowly, cautiously, I reached for the light switch. Click. The lights flickered back on, illuminating the apartment, revealing emptiness. The hooded figures were gone. The guardian was gone. The oppressive presence was gone. Just me, alone in my apartment, surrounded by flickering lights and warped reality, but free. Had I succeeded? Had I truly fought them off? Or was this just a temporary reprieve? Would they be back? Would the guardian return, even more vengeful, more determined? I didn't know. I didn't have the answers. But for now, in this moment of fragile silence, I had survived. I had made an impossible choice and I had lived to tell the tale. But the chilling finale was far from over. As I looked around my apartment, at the warped walls, the distorted shadows, at the lingering metallic scent, I realized something truly terrifying. The reality I had known was gone, shattered, irrevocably altered. The veil had been lifted, and I had glimpsed the darkness that lay beneath the surface of the world. And now, that darkness was a part of me. The whispers were gone for now. The hooded figures had vanished. But the eyes were still watching. Not from the Order, not from the Guardian, but from something else. Something deeper. Something ancient, lurking in the shadows beyond human comprehension, drawn by the ritual, by the truth I had uncovered, by the door I had inadvertently opened. As I looked out my window at the city lights twinkling in the distance, at the shadows stretching long and distorted under the street lamps, I saw them. Not hooded figures, not pale faces, but eyes. Everywhere. Hidden in the shadows, reflected in the glass, staring back at me from the darkness. Countless eyes, ancient, knowing, watching, waiting. They were no longer hunting me. They were observing me, studying me, curious about the mortal who had dared to glimpse their world, to tamper with their secrets. I had survived the Order of the Obsidian Eye, but I had unleashed something far greater, far more terrifying. And now I was trapped in a new reality, a reality where the veil was thin, where the darkness was always present, where the eyes were always watching. The choice was no longer about running or fighting back. It was about embracing the terrifying truth, accepting the new reality, living in a world where the impossible was real, where the unseen was always present, where the eyes were always watching. And as I stood there, bathed in the cold light of the moon, surrounded by the unseen eyes, a chilling thought settled in my mind, a whisper of truth that echoed in the silence. Maybe I had never truly been meant to be silent. Maybe I was meant to witness. Maybe I was meant to see. And maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter, a new reality, a new kind of horror. A horror that was no longer chasing me. A horror that was now a part of me. The chilling finale was not an end. It was a terrifying dawn. And the eyes would always be watching. Forever.